The grip of ideology is unbearable. It doesn't matter how much the illusion of progress markets itself to you in the form of technology, distractions like AI, robots, to simple consumer products. You kind of care. It looks and feels nice, and it makes you sound smart to talk about it. But it's what you believe will carry you to the end times, paradise, the promised land, or whatever you want to call it. That is the type of drug that nothing else can compete with. It's a drug people turn against their own parents for, their entire families for. So good is this drug that you spend years in a foreign land trying to discover it. At best, you obsess over it almost daily, to the point where they can make $1 billion industry out of it. Countless people are being killed right now, and since the beginning of time, in the name of ideology. It's the thing that you enslave people for, that you murder your political opponents for, that you fight wars over. So how did things get so bad? Or a better way to put it is, how are things so perpetually bad? This is a good place to start. Most of your life is spent dealing with or manipulating limited objects, whether this is in your mind or in the external world. You learn your whole life to automatically analyze an object and determine its worth. You learn to see completeness through a set of boundaries, a pattern of limitations. All of this makes it impossible for you to perceive actual negative space or the absence of content. To think, to make a distinction, is always easier than to not think. Your brain can't handle the absence of material, and so you're actively discouraged from seeking that. Because of this, it is impossible for you to, out of nowhere, perceive a negation, or negative space in general. In order to do that, you have to rely on the distance or difference between two objects or reference points. This is good, this is bad. This is moral, this isn't. We should do this and not the other. The only way for a human to completely perceive negation is through the contrast between two or more different objects. Even when talking about things that don't exist, that has to be metaphorically explained using things that do. You might be wondering, what is wrong with this particular approach? Well, there is an existential catch. All of these negations are only temporary, superficial, or circumstantial, a bad replication of actual completeness. If you wonder why existential questions never seem to get any satisfactory answers, this is the reason why. All attempts to codify or condense existential concepts is an attempt to put a number onto something that is inherently absolute. The great dilemma is this: the only way you know any object, the only way you are familiar with existence, material or not, is through differentiation within the rest of the environment. Since you only know how to see contrast, and you're best trained to do so, the only tool that you have access to is through another negation. Every new thought you have is derived from all the older thoughts and experiences. And so every new thought, any new discovery, or revelation will likely only go towards reinforcing your existing mental structures. So you have a situation where all of your thoughts, whether it affirms or contradicts, is coming from the same original instinct. That way, even the thoughts that result from you trying to be objective or impartial are recycled and repurposed into strengthening the existing network of distinctions The important difference here is that to build up this network is very easy, and maintaining it is your natural instinct, but dismantling it requires an outside force to literally burn it down. You cannot destroy an existing ideology by adding more parts to it. That only helps it survive longer in the short term. And since you're so used to knowing this way, you assume that this is the only way to know. And anything that you don't know is substituted by a series of assumptions and distinctions that become so complex and self-sustaining that you forget that you actually don't know. But it's exactly this massive network of distinctions that ideology protects and preserves itself. You really have no other choice but to accept that understanding is so profoundly beyond your control, such that anyone who advertises to you any form of thought with the promise of ending all questions is selling you a defective product. Anyone who promises the truth through contradiction, completion through negation, in all of its forms, through religion, through philosophy, through political identity, through moral systems, through any way of life or code of conduct, or, by the same standards, an intentional lack of belief, the absence of code of conduct or morality. In other words, freedom through an enforced rejection of boundaries does not know what they are promising and knows nothing of the absolute. You can't negotiate your possession of what is right or what is absolute through a combination of thoughts, texts, and rules, images in your mind that only occur to you when convenient and disappears in the face of actual reality. You know this, but you listen to them anyways. The selling of knowledge is as compelling today as it was back then, and based on a foundation just as, if not more fragile than ever. For you, it's about possession. You assume that the rules apply the same way to the existential as it does to the material. The more you possess, the better off you'll be. Because the idea of possessing something that is other than you is way too attractive. Just the prospect, the possibility of owning something that you have no right to own is something that you cannot afford to give up. And that is exactly the promise of ideology, religious, political, or academic. That is what you choose to rely on. That is what keeps the majority of the population sane. And that is what you have built your life around.